Don't like doing things twice, but you just kind of have to. Okay, the Oldsmobile rear main seals, or at least the non-rope type, the lip seal type, they're actually a 460 Ford seal. There is no such thing as an Oldsmobile rear seal. Actually, the rear seal diameter on a 460 Ford is slightly smaller in diameter than the Olds crank. So if you just put it in just the way it is, it's usually pretty tight. And a lot of times, after you've rotated the crankshaft a few times, you'll see that it's transferring the material onto the crankshaft, which means it's just physically too tight. So one little trick that I do is I'll take my little pocket knife here. Number one, you have to trim this off. That's got to go. And there's just enough material on the back side before it gets to metal to make this thing really tight. So if you just take your pocket knife and trim this right down to the metal, you see there's not much coming off here. Hey, don't try this at home. You cut your finger off. Need to be a professional. Just that little bit will make this not drag too much. Make sure you put the lip seal in facing the bearing. Basically, when pressure gets behind that, it forces this against the crankshaft, and that's what makes it seal. If you put it the other way around, it'll leak. Secondly, I haven't found a need to glue these in, especially if you have to take the motor back apart for whatever reason. It just makes a mess and you'll have to replace the seal and scrape everything out. But it's just like a bearing. When you torque this up, these two surfaces will be held tightly against each other, forcing this in that cavity, and I haven't found a need for it. I think I'm going to add just a little bit of oil. Yep. Okay, now here's the place for the sticky lubricant. Instead of oil, I'll usually put a little bit of this Federal Mogul assembly lubricant. You know, they recommend it on bearings and camshafts and all that. It's kind of thick, but I'll usually put it on the rear main seal just because it's got quite a lot of drag there, and it doesn't hurt to give it a little extra protection. But at this point, we already know we're good, so. Okay, back to the original procedure. I'll torque up the rear first so that when you're rotating the crank to check it, it doesn't pull the seal out. We already know that our crank doesn't interfere or have any issues there, so torque this one up first this time, and then we'll go to the thrust again. One nice thing about the ARP fasteners is that they have this broached end on them so that you don't have to sit there and screw it in by hand and have nothing to hold on to. You just use a 3/16 Allen wrench and something doesn't feel right, but that's okay. Stop and look. Don't just jam it in there. I think what I'll do is I'll put the studs in first. That'll help align it better. Always remember that. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Okay, we're there now. You notice the drag? It's got a considerable amount on there. If I didn't trim that, you couldn't hardly turn this crankshaft. And the same goes for our original mock-up, you know. I've only got one bearing torqued. Quite a lot of drag there. You would never know if you had an issue somewhere else. My typical customer, you know, first thing I ask them is, you know, what is our goal? Whether it is, do you need to make a certain amount of horsepower? Do you need to win a certain class? Do you need to run a certain ET? What is that goal? Once they tell me what the goal is, at that point, I've done this stuff long enough where it's pretty simple. We just make it happen, you know? I mean, I could just build a motor for them and then send them on their way, but no, I've already been there, done that with getting that motor to go down a racetrack, even if they need suspension help. You know, I have a lot of experience in all of these areas, so my typical customer, when they come in and when they leave, they're capable of achieving their goals. For this project, we're using J&E forged pistons. We have a Lunati big block Chevrolet connecting rod, H-Beam, very strong, and the pins are from J&E also. We're going to install this piston and rod combination together utilizing spiral locks. They're a full floating deal. I've already installed them on the one side. They're kind of tricky if you haven't done this before, but I've done this quite a lot of times. It's a piece of cake. The one thing you need to make sure is when you mount the piston and rod together that you have the chamfer side of the connecting rod going towards the cheek of the crankshaft. So basically you'll just oil everything up a little bit, you know, and again, oil works just fine. You don't need any special lubricants here. Chamfer side to the left. Okay, watch closely. Here's the tricky part. You almost can't even describe how you do it. You just do it. I've done a million of these. You got to be aggressive with it a little bit. I can assure you, if you've never done that before, it won't take you that long. Like I say, you got to be just aggressive with it just a little bit. When you hear it snap in, you know you're good. Take a good look at it. Make sure that nothing is sticking out, or you just want to make sure that it's seated. 2 per side. Next, I'll put the piston rings on.